On March 29, 2014, was the day the world first learned of a troubling mystery on a day that began like any other. In Atlanta, Georgia, a vibrant city known for its burgeoning entertainment scene, a young woman's dreams were about to come to a sudden halt. Angela Rabotte was a dancer, a model, and a fiercely dedicated single mother to her 3-year-old daughter, Sharon. For Angela, her daughter was the center of her universe, the reason she worked tirelessly to make a name for herself in a demanding industry. She navigated the city's club scene with a natural poise and a beauty that seemed to come to her effortlessly. She was on the cusp of true success, having landed modeling gigs for book covers and magazines, and she was poised to take her career to the next level. She had a strong sense of self and an unwavering commitment to providing a better life for Sharon, no matter the cost. Her journey was a testament to her strength, her ambition, and her deep love for her child, a love that would be tested in the most tragic way imaginable. It was an early spring night when Angela dropped off her daughter with a trusted babysitter. A working single mother, she often relied on friends and family to help care for Sharon while she pursued her career. That night, she was scheduled to perform at a private party at an upscale hotel in Midtown Atlanta. For Angela, these gigs were more than just work. They were an opportunity to build her reputation and secure a more stable future for herself and her daughter. She had a talent for captivating an audience, and her natural beauty and charm made her a popular figure in the city's vibrant nightlife. She was careful to maintain a professional distance, but the nature of the work sometimes drew undesirable attention. For her own protection and peace of mind, she had begun carrying a handgun, a small comfort in a world that could be as exciting as it was dangerous. She had hit her stride, and it seemed her star was finally about to rise. Angela's professional life was a stark contrast to her personal world. Away from the flashing lights and pounding music, she was a committed and loving mother. Sharon was her everything, and she would go to any length to provide for her. Part of that commitment included her complicated relationship with Sharon's father, Darrell Campbell. The two had an on-and-off-again romance that, while deeply connected by their daughter, was also marked by a certain volatile dynamic. They were a couple who had their moments, and both were known to have their tempers. Their relationship wasn't described as openly contentious, but it was clear they were not a good match for one another romantically. Despite their difficulties, they shared a bond through Sharon, a connection that was about to be severed in a way they could never have anticipated. Angela's unwavering focus on her daughter's well-being was a force that friends and family would come to rely on in the dark days ahead. The private party in Midtown Atlanta stretched into the early morning hours, as these events often did. As the night wore on, the group decided to move the celebration to a private home north of the city. Angela went along, continuing to work and network. As the new day dawned, she was ready to go home to check on her daughter. She reached for her phone and called a longtime friend, a man named Charles Outlaw. She'd known Charles since she was a teenager, and he was part of her close-knit circle of friends. She trusted him, and she believed he was a safe option to get her back across town and home to Sharon. What she didn't know was that this seemingly routine phone call would set off a chain of events that would unravel a chilling secret and lead to a tragic end. The journey home was about to become a point of contention and the last ride of her life. Charles Outlaw arrived to pick up Angela, but the mood in the car was anything but relaxed.
According to Charles, he was immediately upset that he had to drive all the way to the other end of the city to get her. His frustration quickly turned into an argument as he and Angela began to bicker. Angela, never one to back down, became defensive. She pushed back, telling him that he was not the only man willing to do her a favor. She had plenty of other friends who would have come to her aid and given her a ride, no questions asked. The argument escalated, and a sense of unease filled the small space of the car. Charles felt humiliated by her words and claims. The casual ride home had become a tense and hostile journey, fueled by anger and resentment. This simple disagreement would later be recounted as a pivotal moment in the final moments of Angela's life. According to Charles's initial account, the argument reached a head, and he made an unplanned stop at his girlfriend's house. He claimed that he left Angela alone in the car for a moment, assuming she would wait for his return. The atmosphere in the vehicle was still tense from their argument, and he believed she was either angry or simply fed up with the conversation. Charles was gone for an unknown period, but when he returned to the car, Angela was gone. He said he was baffled, and he assumed that she had either stormed off in a fit of rage or had made good on her threat to call one of the many other men she claimed would be willing to pick her up. He reported seeing her texting other men throughout the ride home, which only added to his suspicion that she had found another way to get back. He left and went on with his life, believing Angela had simply found her own way. Back home, the babysitter grew increasingly concerned. Angela, who was a devoted mother, had not checked in on Sharon as she always did. She made a call to Angela's mother, Judy Rabotte, who immediately felt a cold dread in her heart. Judy knew her daughter better than anyone. Angela was a creature of habit, and her first priority was always her child. Judy explained that if she sent her a text, Angela would answer. If she called, Angela would call her back. The sudden silence was deafening, and it was all the confirmation she needed. Something was terribly wrong. Her mother's intuition was screaming that Angela had not simply run away or forgotten to call. The family and friends began to feel a building panic, and they started to take action on their own without waiting for the authorities. They knew they had to find her, and they knew they had to find her fast. As the hours stretched into a full day of silence, a frantic run of calls and texts went out to anyone and everyone who might know where Angela was. Friends and family were terrified, and they didn't want to wait for the official channels to get organized. They took matters into their own hands, forming a search party to scour the areas where Angela was last seen. The search was a testament to how loved and cherished Angela was within her community. One of the first people to show up and join the search was Charles Outlaw, the last known person to see her alive. He had a story to tell, and he was seemingly willing to help. However, as he shared his account with Detective Colin Flynn, the details began to seem suspicious. Outlaw claimed that he and Angela had argued bitterly in the car after he picked her up.
Something about his demeanor was off, and he sensed that Charles was not telling the whole truth. The detective also discovered that Charles was a known drug dealer and had an outstanding warrant for a probation violation. His history and suspicious behavior were too much to ignore, and a plan was put in place to arrest him. On the second day of the search party, Detective Flynn and his team prepared to make their move. As Charles Outlaw showed up to help again, the detective approached him. The moment Flynn put the first handcuff on him, Outlaw's demeanor changed. He immediately tried to flee, bolting away from the scene. Detective Flynn, a seasoned professional, was quick to react. He physically tackled Outlaw to the ground, bringing him under control and successfully placing him in handcuffs. The struggle confirmed the detective's suspicions. Charles had something to hide. A subsequent search of his person revealed that he was also carrying narcotics. The arrest was a major breakthrough, but it still didn't explain Angela's disappearance. One question still lingered in the minds of the investigators. Where was Daryl Campbell, the father of Angela's child? His absence from the initial search party was a glaring red flag. While Charles Outlaw was now in custody on unrelated charges, the mystery of Angela's disappearance continued. The initial search party had concluded, and friends and family were still living in a state of suspended grief. The police continued to field phone calls from people who knew Angela, all of them expressing their concern and disbelief that she would simply disappear without a trace. Detective Flynn, still baffled, turned his attention to the two men who were closest to her, Charles Outlaw and Daryl Campbell. He had a hunch that the truth lay somewhere between the two of them. The detective felt that Charles had wanted a deeper, more romantic relationship with Angela, but every time he would ask him directly, Outlaw would vehemently deny it. The detective was determined to peel back the layers of deception and find the truth, even if it meant venturing into the darkest corners of their lives. Detective Flynn decided to get a more detailed account from Charles Outlaw. He had Charles walk him through every step of the night from the moment he left Angela in his car to go to his girlfriend's house. Charles led the detective through a parking lot and then down a secluded trail. As they walked, the detective became even more suspicious. Charles appeared to know the trail too well, leading them a quarter of a mile into the woods in the middle of the night. This was not a well-trodden path, and it seemed unlikely that someone would be able to navigate it with such certainty. This strange, seemingly unnecessary detour only added to the detective's mounting suspicions. It was another crack in Charles's story, a story that was now beginning to feel like a poorly constructed lie. When Charles returned to the main road, he pointed to all the possible places where Angela could have gone. Charles's story was full of holes. He pointed to all the different ways Angela could have disappeared from the parking lot, but the detective wasn't buying it. He had a long list of people he needed to speak to and a lot of different avenues to pursue. But the most pressing matter was the absence of Darrell Campbell. While everyone else who loved Angela was out searching for her, Darrell was nowhere to be found. Detective Flynn knew this was a significant red flag, and he wanted to hear Darrell's side of the story. Crime Watch Daily, also keen to find answers, tracked down Darrell Campbell and convinced him to give his first on-camera interview. The missing piece of the puzzle might finally be revealed, and the world would hear what Darrell had to say about the disappearance of his daughter's mother. The interview was about to get to the heart of what happened that night.
In a televised interview that would become an essential part of the investigation, Darrell Campbell sat down to explain his absence from the initial search. His account was both heartbreaking and revealing. He claimed that he had no idea Angela was missing until 2 days after she disappeared. He learned the shocking news not from friends or family, but from a message on Facebook. A friend had sent him a picture of a missing poster and asked him where his daughter was. He said he was stunned and confused, not knowing what to make of the news. He also explained that he didn't have a car at the time, and no one had told him about the organized search. He said he was never contacted by the detectives or anyone from Angela's family who had organized the initial search efforts. As the gravity of the news set in, Darrell's world came crashing down. He described feeling an empty feeling and claimed he couldn't eat. For an entire day, he said he lay in the same spot, consumed by grief and worry. He said he knew for sure that something was wrong. This was the moment he decided he had to take action. He got up the next day and went to the search. That was day 2 of the search efforts, and it was a day that would bring him face to face with the last person to have seen Angela alive, Charles Outlaw. The two men stood on opposite sides of a painful reality, and the tension between them was palpable. Darrell, still grieving and worried about his daughter, confronted Charles, demanding answers. He wanted to know where Angela was, and he didn't care who heard him ask. Darrell, filled with grief and rage, looked Charles Outlaw in the eye and demanded to know where Angela was. "You're the last person that she was seen with, so where is she at? 'Cause my daughter's going to start asking for a mom real soon." The question was a raw and emotional one, and it hit a nerve. The tension between the two men was so high that the detectives had to step in and separate them. The women in the group became scared, as it looked like the confrontation was about to turn into a full-blown fight. The showdown confirmed the suspicions of everyone present. The missing persons case had reached a boiling point, and the investigators knew they had to find the truth, and they had to find it fast. The fight was broken up, and the detectives took Charles Outlaw. With Darrell Campbell's alibi checked and confirmed, police shifted their full attention to Charles Outlaw. Detective Flynn had been lied to almost every day of his career, and he knew a bad story when he heard one. Outlaw's account of what happened that night was disjointed and lacked the cohesion of someone trying to recall a true event. It was a story full of holes, and it was the primary reason the detective was so suspicious. As investigators delved deeper into Outlaw's past, they found a pattern of behavior that only added to their suspicions. The more they learned about him, the more they believed he was capable of a great and terrible deception.
The missing persons case was no longer a mystery, but an investigation into a possible homicide. Investigators began listening to phone calls Charles Outlaw made to a friend in prison before his arrest. The calls were disturbing and filled with dark implications. Outlaw talked about going through a lot that's been happening on the daily and having a big story to tell her. He told his friend that she was going to be mad at him. His words were cryptic and haunting, hinting at a terrible truth that was hiding just beneath the surface. He repeated the words, "It's bad. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad." The calls were an ominous prelude to what investigators were about to discover. They were a breadcrumb trail of a guilty man trying to confess without confessing.
The final pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place when a friend of Angela's came forward with a crucial piece of information. They told police they had seen Charles Outlaw at a car wash the morning after Angela disappeared. He wasn't just getting his car washed, he was meticulously cleaning out the trunk and vacuuming the interior. The car was a rental, a Dodge Dart. The friend's account was a major red flag for investigators. Who goes to such great lengths to detail a rental car? The act was so unusual and so suspicious that it confirmed their suspicions that something happened in that car. It was clear that Charles was trying to remove evidence, but what he didn't know was that his actions would later come back to haunt him in court. The meticulously cleaned car was now a crime scene. 6 days after Angela was reported missing, a team of city surveyors made a gruesome and heartbreaking discovery in a field just 5 miles from where Charles Outlaw had claimed he left her. The surveyors were just starting their work when they came across Angela's body lying in the tall grass. She was dead, killed by a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. It was an execution-style killing. The news sent a ripple of grief and shock through the community. Angela's family was inconsolable. Her mother, Judy, was escorted to the scene by a chaplain, and she knew in her heart what they were going to tell her. She leaned on her daughter and cried as the finality of the situation washed over her. The discovery put an end to the hopeful search for a missing person and turned the case into a full-fledged murder investigation. With Angela's body now found, the case was now officially a homicide investigation. The meticulous cleaning of the rental car that Charles had done was not enough to hide all the evidence. Investigators discovered something else that would be a major break in the case. Gunshot residue was found on the interior roof of the car. The physical evidence confirmed what the police had already suspected. A gunshot had gone off inside the vehicle. The discovery of the gunshot residue was a final nail in the coffin of Charles's lies. The evidence was irrefutable, and it contradicted every part of his story. It was clear that the murder had happened in that car, but the investigators needed a confession. To get it, they would need to go undercover. Police hatched a plan to get Charles to confess. The woman he'd been talking to in prison was now out. Investigators got her to agree to a risky mission. She would visit Charles in jail while wearing a wire. The goal was to get him to talk about the murder. Charles was a paranoid man, and as a drug dealer, he was worried about being recorded. He refused to say anything out loud. Instead, he chose to act out the crime, mouthing his story to her without making a sound. It was an act that was both desperate and chilling. He mimed what he said happened, an argument, Angela pulling a gun, him taking it from her, and it just going off, as he put it, to the back of her head. He believed he was being clever, but he was about to be proven wrong. The medical examiner's report confirmed that Angela's wound was a contact execution-style wound, not a situation where a gun would just go off. Charles's mime act was a lie. The investigators also learned that the small-caliber wound was a perfect match for the gun Angela was known to carry for protection. But the most damning evidence was what Charles revealed to his girlfriend without ever speaking a word. She came out of that conversation knowing details that were never released to the media. She knew exactly where the gunshot wound was, and she knew that Charles was surprised that there was very little blood. She also knew that he described how Angela's body had just slowly slumped forward after being shot, which was exactly how the medical examiner said it would have happened.
With all the evidence they had compiled, prosecutors moved forward with their case. Charles Outlaw was charged with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and concealing a body. The trial began, but it was over before it ever got off the ground. A judge declared a mistrial after an audio recording of Charles was played, and it was feared that a negative statement about his character would unfairly prejudice the jury. Despite the setback, the prosecution was able to get the case back on the docket in just 7 days. A new jury was seated, and the trial resumed. It took only 5 days for the jury to reach a verdict. A key piece of evidence was a message from Charles that he had sent, in which he boasted that he was going to beat the charges because he was capable of selling fairy tales to Cinderella. The jury had no Cinderellas, and they found Charles Outlaw guilty on all counts. He was convicted and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 15 years in a Georgia state prison. The case was finally closed, but the pain and loss for Angela's family and friends were a life sentence of their own. Her mother, Judy, reflected on the beautiful life that had been stolen. She said, "How can somebody take such a beautiful life?" She said that her daughter could always make you smile no matter what, and Charles had robbed us all of that. For Darrell Campbell, the father of Angela's daughter, the journey was only beginning. He was now a single dad with a daughter to raise. He said the thing he missed most was Angela being a mom to their daughter. He knew he would have to tell Sharon the whole story one day, but for now, he simply told her that her mom had passed away and was in heaven. "Can we go to heaven?" Sharon would ask. "I want to go to heaven so I could be with my mom." And it was in those questions that Darrell was reminded of the terrible reality of his loss.